All right, good morning, everybody, or wherever you are in the world. Happy Friday, and welcome to the Digital Influence Show. I get to be the guest. I'm Brandon Lee, and thank you so much for joining us today. And I have Tom Burton with me today, and we are going to chat a little bit about his journey in expanding his influence and using digital and social media and posts to share a little bit more about him, his company, and his book. So before we get started, let me introduce you to Tom. Tom and we've shared tacos together. I mean, that
No,
says a lot right
we
there.
shared carnitas together.
We
Let's get the story straight. All right.
there you go. So we
And
shared
margaritas, I think,
carnitas,
were
and
involved as well.
I was getting, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
There were definitely margaritas involved. Absolutely, Tom. So Tom is a co-founder and the CEO of Leadsmart Technologies with my other friend Kevin Brown, and he's also the author of a new book called The Revenue Zone. So Tom, welcome to the Digital Influence Show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, I love having you here. So, Tom, tell us. Let's just jump right in. I mean, tell us a little bit about the book, and then tell us why you wrote it.
Yeah. So, I've been involved in sales and marketing in some way, shape, or form in over 30 years. And, I also have, as you mentioned, I'm a co-founder in a CRM company. And so we're working with a lot of sales organizations and marketing organizations all the time. And it was really starting to become, this was just kind of pre-pandemic, but right around the pandemic area, I was just noticing more and more that the quote unquote old way of marketing and sales, especially in B2B, was just
Yeah,
not working as well. And, I talk about it in the book. I was in a board meeting, going through my sales projections, and one of the board members said, "How comfortable do you feel about this?" And like, it felt like somebody had hit me in the stomach. It was like, and that's never been my case. I've always usually had very good, evidence to back everything up. And so it really hit me again a couple of years ago that the world of B2B sales and marketing was changing and changing and changing rapidly. So I kind of dug in and started to understand what was going on. Obviously everyone would have thought, well, it's the pandemic, right? But there were a lot of other variables going on. And one of the biggest things I found is, especially as buyers get younger, is they want to be in control of their own journey. They don't want to be sold. They generally don't want to talk to a salesperson. They want help and they want guidance, but they want to be able to be in control of their own journey. And so that then set off sort of a whole series of research, which is what I went into in the book on, okay, if that's the case, what do you do about that? Like, how do
right.
you actually, build a marketing and sales plan that aligns to the way buyers want to buy versus the way that sellers want to sell? And what I was seeing is there was a chasm starting to create between, more and more of a chasm creating between buyers and sellers, and it just making it harder for both sides. So that was the basic premise of the book, and just came from a lot of my own experience and working with some of our clients.
Thank you, Tom. You said a lot there, and I want to unpack a little bit of it
Okay.
because I mean, and it's all great stuff. But I would love for you to unpack a little bit. You said at the very beginning of that is everything, and I put it up there, is everything's changed, everything's changing. You thought it was pandemic, but it's more than that. What is your experiences? You've got 30 years experience in this space. What else is changing, and what does that mean on a practical day-to-day basis for companies?
Yeah, and I go through this in the book, right? I call it the perfect disruptive storm, if you will. And I think there's three things that have converged together, not created by the pandemic, but accelerated by the pandemic. So
Hmm.
the first is obviously this whole thing about virtual business, right? A lot of sales organizations, especially in the B2B world, lived off of in-person meetings, in-person shows, in-person relationships. I mean, they obviously didn't even know about Zoom prior to, all of this. And now that's shifted permanently, not just because of the pandemic, but because of productivity, right? People
Right.
realize you can get a lot more done doing Zoom meetings, and, even customers that would be willing to accept a lunch meeting before are not accepting a lunch meeting because it's just not as productive, right? They can get more
Right.
done through virtual business. So it's not like shows are going away or in person is going away. But virtual business, or the whole digital first, is definitely here to stay. And it's clear that it's here to stay, because we talk to sales teams all the time that are frankly freaking out a bit about that whole virtual business thing. And it's not going back to the way that it used to be. Secondly is just all of this, and this is more of a marketing issue, but all of this whole privacy issues, first party data, third party data, iOS, all of those types of things. I mean, a lot of people don't realize it now, but Apple, if you put in an email, like you're trying to opt into something, they'll give you the option to put in basically a proxy email or an alias, so that you don't have to share your real email with people, right? All of that kind of stuff to kind of, again, why are they doing that? Well, privacy, but people want to do that because they don't want to be bombarded by all kinds of sales, spam email and sales calls and so forth. And then the third, which is what I mentioned before, is just the shift in the buyer mentality and the buyer mindset, right? So as B2B buyers, we want to buy more as we buy as consumers. And as consumers, we do our research online, we do all of our homework. We don't want to talk to a salesperson until we're ready to talk to a salesperson. And then when we're ready to talk to a salesperson, we want them to be more of a consultant and a guide rather than a salesperson. They, to help me facilitate what I can't get on my own. And that's carrying over into B2B. And especially we're seeing more and more as B2B buyers become younger. In the millennial world, the majority of B2B buyers will be millennials in the next couple of years. It's just very different. So you take those three things together, and that's pretty disruptive to the traditional way of doing B2B sales and marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's totally changed, and everything you lined up there just exemplifies it. So, what does that mean as we move into this new era, if you will? What does that mean for salespeople and sales organizations?
Yeah. So first of all, the mindset needs to change. And I talk about this in the book, is that if you just take the mindset that that we're going to let the buyer be more in control of their journey, and we're going to enable that buyer to be in control of their own journey, rather than me as the sales team trying to control the buyer's journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, if you take that mindset for a minute, and I agree, it can be scary, right? It's kind of a scary, oh my, but just take the mindset for a minute and then look at, okay, how could that be done? So what I have found, and this is what I've put in detail in the book is, and what I've learned just by testing a lot of this, is that if you provide that, we call it the yellow brick road, right? If you help the prospect take the steps that you know that they need to take to make sense of what they're doing, to make sense of what they're looking for, help them go through that process, keep them from going down the Google rabbit holes and things like that, where people get lost and overwhelmed. And if you can do that and set that up, you're now going to be really, really, the buyer is going to be much more willing to work with you, and you're going to have a big competitive advantage. And we've seen that, is that when we enable the buyer, we get a big competitive advantage over companies that are not doing that. So there's a lot more to it, but that's the general idea, is take that mindset and then implement things that enable you to accomplish that with your buyer.
So I love that, how it transitioned us to how do we enable buyers then? What activities do we need to do to enable them? And then, of course, today's topic is around your social activity, and that you've, as I say, you've upped your game in that. And for everybody listening in our chat before we got on the call, Tom said, I'm a neophyte in this. Like I'm really trying to figure some of this stuff out. But so two-part question there. What does it mean for us to enable that? And then how have you personally started implementing some of that?
Yeah. So the revenue zone, right? The name of the book, what that means, as I defined in there, is our goal is to get our prospects into the revenue zone. And what does that mean? That they're willing, or they're seriously considering doing business with us, right? It doesn't mean that they have done business, but they're seriously considering that. Well, how does that occur? Well, they have to have some demand for what it is we're selling, some excitement for what we're selling. And there has to be some know, like, trust in our business, right? Those two things have to come together. So the question is, how do you get somebody who's never heard of you, right, or never heard of your product, or knows very little about you or your product, from that point to that revenue zone? And that's what we talk about in the book. And you can do it. You can accomplish and look and see what it takes to get a prospect from here to there by reversing successful sales cycle, reverse engineering, successful sales cycles, looking at what you've done. And what we found is there's between generally 25 or 35 touch points on average to get somebody from that, I don't know anything about you, into the revenue zone. So how do you best guide that person or that prospect, or in a B2B world, prospects, plural, in a business, to that point? And that's a combination of, well, digital and as well as some, in-person stuff potentially on the way. So you have to work that out for your business. And that's what I go through in the book, is how to do that, how to get that, again, that yellow brick road from, hey, I don't know much about you, I don't know much about your company, to having your prospect in the revenue zone. And a big part of that is that digital experience that you provide that prospect. So again, we could talk a while on this whole topic, but that's the general idea of enabling. I think going back to the start of that, to your second part of your question, I've been on LinkedIn for a long time. But when I launched the book, and as I looked at this, and I had quite a few followers, but they were really what I call friends and family, right? They're people that I knew or I'd worked with or whatever. They certainly weren't, I wasn't influencing anything outside of my immediate family and friends zone, so to speak. So I really took a step back and said, okay, how do we start influencing and reaching more people that should be interested in what I'm talking about, that are not in that friends and family group? And that's what I've started to really work on over the last few months. And boy, it's really interesting what I'm learning on all of that. And then I'm seeing how that ties back into a lot of the concepts of the yellow brick road in the revenue zone.
Well, don't quit there. What have you learned? What in the concepts
Well, I
there? I
thought we were
love
done.
this.
Are we?
No way,
Yeah.
because I mean, I think you just took the first bite of the meat of this, and I love your story with this. And as I said earlier, you said you're a neophyte in this. So
Yeah.
what have you done? As I say, you've upped your game, right, in your social. So what have you experienced? What have you learned?
Yeah. So, and I'm an engineer, so I'm always trying to reverse engineer things, right? And look and see, okay, why is this happening in a certain way? Here's what I've learned so far is, first of all, when you get onto digital, right, and you're trying to build influence, you certainly can't do that around buy my stuff. Okay. That's,
Wait, we can't do that
I
anymore?
know I would like to, but it just, that's one thing I've learned. Okay. Isn't that
Yeah,
revolutionary?
yeah.
No, what I learned is that there are three things that I'm seeing have to come together. One is, okay, who are you trying to influence? People. I call it the 3 Ps. So who are you trying to influence, right? What people are you trying to reach? In my case, I'm trying to reach B2B marketers and sales leaders, and to a degree, C-level executives, right? To get them to at least be aware of this new approach, this new mindset, this new strategy that we're bringing to the table. So that's my first thing. And the next thing is, okay, if I know my people, what's my purpose of doing this? And the second P, purpose. And the purpose is, well, I want to help people and enable people to see that there is a different way of going about this B2B sales and marketing process. And that if you're going to continue to be competitive, you at least need to start looking at this and evaluating this and testing this as you go forward, especially get a longer buyer. Then the third thing, and I think this is the X factor in all of this digital influence, is, what is your passion? The third P, right? And
Love it.
right, so it's great to
Love it.
say, all right, what's my purpose and who are the people, but what's my
Yeah.
passion? And my passion, and I think maybe this came out earlier, right, is I don't like to see this chasm existing between sales and marketing and prospects, and the cat and mouse game that goes on sometimes, and just how we, I'll give you an example. I went to a software company, I won't name the company, and I downloaded something off their website. We're already a customer, by the way, of that software company. So I downloaded some information I needed off the website. Over the last 3 days, I've had 18 phone calls, right, from SDRs, and God knows how many emails, right? Is that an experience that I want, or that anybody wants with a B2B sale? Does that make me feel, good about that company and wanting to do business with them and move them into the revenue zone? No,
Mhm.
but we do that because we feel like we have to, right? We have to make our
Right.
numbers, we have to make our quotas, so we almost have to swarm sometimes, to get.
Yeah.
And so my passion is to get, the world to look at this a little bit differently. If you look at Gartner and some of the other analysts, they're starting to look at this differently as well and
Mhm.
see that you can actually be successful with B2B marketing and sales without swarming the customer and creating a bad experience and doing all the things that we just don't like when you think of the word sales or marketing. So the 3 Ps: people, purpose,
Yeah.
and passion.
Right. Okay. So before we run out of time, because I mean, I find myself just, first of all, I just got the book. Thank you,
Okay.
Tom, for sending it to me, but I'm taking it with me next week on vacation because I'm excited to dive into this and, compare some notes. And I don't know if you've seen, I wrote an ebook. It was probably about 30 pages several years ago called The Buyer Circle of Trust, which was on this topic of, buyers have technology now too. You mentioned
Yep.
Apple lets you put in a proxy email. I mean, I've got spam filters on my phone now
Yeah. Yeah.
that, right? We forget sometimes as salespeople that technology is out there being built for buyers too,
Hmm.
to keep
Yeah.
us out. And we have to earn the right to be in their circle of trust. And what I've seen with you, as I say, you've upped your game is, man, Tom, you went from, as you said, you use LinkedIn with family and friends, and you probably did what a lot of us did with LinkedIn. We're like, oh yeah, accept, accept, accept. But we know that only 1% of people on LinkedIn publish regularly. And the way that they define that is at least once a month. So when we start sharing content and we up our game, we become part of that 1%. And I've noticed you have done that. So share with us a little bit about your experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of the above, with starting to share more posts.
Yeah. So I think there's 2 strategies, and I think you talk a lot about this with your prospector product and some of the other things that I'm finding to work actually. And you have to do enough, because let's face it, there's a lot of noise out there, right? So how do you cut through the noise and really start to make traction as it relates to that digital influence? So I found is kind of a two-pronged approach. One is, I went and identified a bunch of other influencers in my same space that have similar mindsets and similar passion, and maybe had much larger followings than I did, and identified sort of that, I call it my dream 100, right? Who are the
Hmm.
other people that I want to be associated with? And then I've really got to know them and their content and participate, by commenting, and not just commenting like great post and yeah, but really thinking through and adding to the discussion, right?
Right,
And I have found that works really well. It gets noticed, right? So again, how do you cut through the noise? You cut through the noise with quality over just quantity, so
right,
rather than doing 100 posts of great posts, I do maybe 10 posts a day or 8 posts a day of the people I'm following, but I try and put a meaningful response and contribute to the discussion and so forth. And that's really built up. You had mentioned I've been on quite a few podcasts and stuff recently, and I have more coming, on a really good one this coming week. And that's come from this effort, right? And people respecting the posts and looking at the comments and how I'm participating. So I think that's great. That's exactly your line, right? Find
yeah,
and so forth. The second thing though is yes, your own content. And I think it's got to be more than once a month.
hmm,
I'm finding, if you would have asked me a month ago, I would have said, maybe once a week.
mm,
I'm now thinking I'm not even just thinking, I'm sure that it needs to be more like several times a week. And if I could get to several times a day, honestly, I would, as
hmm,
long as it was relevant, meaningful content and it just wasn't junk, right?
yeah,
So, so the balance is how do you continue to maintain the quality, but at the same time get enough quantity out there? Um, because I think that's how you're going to cut through the noise, right? A lot of people
right,
don't want to do the work, and you've got to do the work on both of those fronts. And it can't just be trite, not really useful data. That's just noise.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've been doing. And what I'm seeing is that it's starting to become a bit of a hockey stick, right? You get some more
Hmm.
traction, you get some more traction, you get, I think I had 5 requests for podcasts this week, right? From different
Yeah.
people. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't even know where that came from.
Hmm.
So it's like you can start to monitor what it is you're doing as you're building that influence by doing those things, and then kind of systematizing that, and then being consistent, right? So not just doing it
Yeah.
for a week and say, okay, well, I'll get to it again next month.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I love everything you're saying for all the obvious reasons that you're experiencing what we preach. Tell me about a little bit more about you mentioned at the beginning, or what you were just saying right now at the very beginning of that. You shared about going and commenting on your top 100 people in their post or posts that they comment on. Share with us about that experience and what you found in doing that.
Well, at first I honestly felt like, what am I going to say? You know, I would get on
Mhm.
there and I would look at, they would have a post, they have a lot of followers, they might have 200 comments already on a post. It's like, okay, what am I going to say? And then you always like, am I going to look stupid or whatever? It's like, we all kind of go through that. But
Yeah.
what I did is I said, I take some time and I review the posts and I review the comments. And then I just kind of think about, if I was sitting with that person, just like we are, right, or
Yeah.
over coffee, what would I say to them?
Yes.
What would I say in reply to their post or their comment? How would I reply to that just
Yeah.
naturally? And that's what I put down. Sometimes it's a shorter comment, sometimes it's a longer comment. It doesn't matter. It's
Mhm.
like, what would be the right response, a meaningful response to that? And again, what I'm finding is that when you do that, it attracts other people that are also watching that. So you're getting likes
Mhm.
and other things. And of course, it's attracting the attention of the person that, the influencer that you're doing the post of. So
Yeah.
it's, it's a little bit art, right? As much as it
Uh-huh.
is science, but it's just like, if you're saying that, how would you respond? And put that in writing.
Right. Ah, see, I love it. I love and it's I don't not to make this about me. That's not my intent at all, but I love that you're taking what we preach and you're applying it and you're having success with it. That's what I really that's why I wanted you on the show, right? To be able to share that. Now, when you're doing those comments, you mentioned that other people are liking it and then you're getting the attention of the person that you're focused on. But what's some of the other um, influence this is happening? Are some of these invites to be on people's shows or YouTube shows, is that coming because they see you commenting in a popular post?
I would assume, right?
Yeah.
Don't, I mean, as we talk to people, we'll find out, kind of the attribution, so to speak, of that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it's just, you start to get your voice. People start to hear your voice. You start to get your
Hmm.
platform. Going back to my passion, right? They hear your passion. They hear your purpose.
Hmm.
And, I think people are always looking for, just like you would be, right? You're looking for guests that are going to bring relevant content to the
Hmm.
table, and that, that you feel are going to have a depth of what they're doing. And if that's coming across in the comments and what you're doing, then that's a good, right? That's a good person then to reach out to potentially
Yeah.
for your show or for the next thing.
Yeah. Earlier, you used the term know, like, and trust.
Hmm.
And I've heard some sales trainers, coaches, leaders out there say relationships don't matter anymore. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I think that's a very broad black and white statement, right? Um, you could look at that in a lot of ways. It's like, well, just like I was said in the beginning, if you define relationships as, hey, we're doing a lot of lunches and coffees and in-person meetings, maybe that's the case. But what is never going to go away is that trust, right? Building trust.
Hmm.
And again, going back to younger buyers in particular, right? Younger buyer, but all of us do, but certainly with millennials and younger buyers, they want to do business with a company that they trust, right? That they have affinity for, or even do business with individually with people that they trust and have affinity for. That is never
Right.
going to go away, right? There is no, in fact, if anything, it's going to get stronger. The question then becomes is how is that trust and affinity built, right? How do you build that trust and affinity is going to be different than maybe you did it before because you brought donuts to everybody on Fridays every day, every week or something like that.
Hmm.
It's a different strategy.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is it's the same as we've always done. It's just um, strategically the same, but implemented differently. Is that a
Yeah.
fair assumption?
Again, you got to build no like trust. That's never going away. So the question is how you go about doing that is different than, or will continue to be different than maybe how you did it in the past.
Yeah.
I had a digital marketing agency in a previous life, and I had a client, and every qualified lead they was from a trade show, right? And they really were like, well, we don't have any more shows for a couple of weeks, or a couple of months, so we're not going to get any more leads. And the only reason they built those leads is because they spent all this time taking them to dinner, meeting in person. Everything was all based around in-person relationship. And that's obviously we fortunately got them set up on some things prior to the pandemic that allowed them to start doing more of this digitally. But I mean, think about that impact if you're relying on everything being in-person meetings, in-person dinners, in-person this.
Hmm.
That's just not sustainable or certainly scalable as you
Right.
go forward.
Well, and I think we find is in this digital world that we can do the same activities just done differently,
Mhm.
and the scale is incredibly different. And go ahead.
Well, and think about, yeah, the scale is the key part, right? You don't even know who's
Yeah.
listening,
Yeah.
right? It's like you're out to dinner with somebody and you've got like 50 other people listening to your conversation. You don't even know that they're there, right? It's the same.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really learning on digital is you don't know who you're going to reach necessarily. You don't even know who's listening, but they're there.
But they're there. And
Yeah.
if you're strategic, right, you're like, as you said, you've got your top 100, and you put them in a list and you go to their profiles and you see what their activity is and you join those digital conversations. You can be very strategic. This isn't like spray and pray.
No, no, no.
This is,
Yeah.
yeah. So tell us, do you have any good, like an example, and you can leave names out, but somebody from your top 100 that you had an intention and you started going and engaging with posts that either they've published or posts that they've commented on, that's played out into either a conversation, a new relationship, or maybe even a sale.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be on a really large sales
Sorry.
podcast next week. I won't say it yet because I know they're going to promote it starting in the next few days. But,
Uh-huh.
you know, it's I would say it's above my levels. It's like I'm above my pay grade a little bit on this one.
Yeah.
Um, but it's because of exactly what you just said, right? I started contributing to their post. I started contributing to their conversations. I started contributing and adding to their community, right? So it's really you become a member of the community, if you want to call it that, or the ecosystem.
Hmm.
And it's but you're doing that digitally, right? And
Hmm.
even as a salesperson, wouldn't you, that's what you want to do, right? You want to become part of your prospect's ecosystem. You want to be looked at as that trusted advisor or, guide or whatever. It's the same exact concept. So, um, yeah, I would say, in fact, all of the podcasts or all of the sort of reaches that I've had so far have all come from that exact strategy. They're not coming from my friends and family other than you, Brandon, but,
Yeah. So what would you say from this experience? What advice would you give to somebody that's watching this, saying, I've been sitting on the sidelines. I think I know I should be doing a little bit more of my social voice. Based on you doing this now, what's your advice to them?
well, I think I think it's essential, right? In my opinion, it's no longer a luxury or a discretionary thing to
Hmm.
build a digital influence. Um, I actually believe that even if you're just looking for a job, right, and you're looking for a job in a company, if you have a some level of digital influence and some level of community that you've created, you're likely going to have an advantage of people who don't. But if you're trying to build a business, if you're trying to build you're a salesperson or a marketing person or a business owner or whatever the case may be, I think there's no way you're going to succeed going forward without building a form of a digital influence in the way that we've described it. And
Right.
and you're certainly, it doesn't mean you won't succeed, I guess, by doing it, but you're going to be left behind, and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be, lose the competitive advantage if you have it with others that are actually doing it and putting it into place. Again, the risk is doing it with, the challenge or the risk is doing it with higher quality and not just doing it to say I'm doing it, right? And I'm sure you see this all the time as, well, I've gone through the motions. I don't understand. It's not produced anything. That's,
Yeah.
like anything else, won't work. So to do
Mm-hmm.
it with the right way, with the right quality, with the right strategy, as you mentioned, I just don't see it as anything other than essential.
Well, and I think your third P of passion needs to play into that, and I would even think authenticity and just being fully yourself adds to that as well. What do you think?
Absolutely. Again, that's where I think also, if you're a salesperson or you're in the sales, you can't do this because I'm doing it. My purpose is to make more sales or make more money, right?
Hmm.
That
That's
won't work.
part of it, right? It's part
Well,
of it.
that's
It's
part of
got
it.
to be
That will
part of it.
happen. That'll happen.
Right. There
That'll
you go.
happen as naturally or organically. So your purpose needs to be, okay, who am I trying to help? And then the passion is why, right? The purpose is more, what am I doing? The passion is the why. Why would I care about this? Or why do I want
Hmm.
to help? And why do I think we need to change, and all of that stuff? So I think you need to understand that. And then that will just naturally build in for yourself. And then that will naturally
Hmm.
build into how you do your commenting, your post, your everything will start to build into that, into the DNA of that.
Yeah. So I want to tap into your engineering analytical side there. Some of the questions I will hear is, okay, the social, it sounds great, but what about how do you quantify it? Right? How do you quantify it? How do you resolve that? Because I know you're a quantified guy.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And that's an area I'm still learning about, or I feel like I'm
Uh-huh.
still learning about. You know, and the same is true even in, I said I had a digital marketing agency. It's true in digital marketing, right? Everybody wants to know, well, did that lead come from Google or Facebook or whatever? And a lot of times you don't know. It's a combination of things, right?
Right.
Attribution is very difficult because in this day and age, there's a lot of different, my point earlier, there's a lot of different touch points and there's a lot of different ways
Right.
that are how they're being influenced. So, you have some of the, I guess, vanity metrics, as I call them, which are your followers and all of
Hmm.
that. And I think that shows, that can be a lens to show that you're moving the needle in one direction or the other. But I
Hmm.
think that the real way to measure it is looking at what you're trying to accomplish, right? And for me, going back to I wanted to get what I wanted to accomplish by doing this was to get more marketers and sales leaders aware of what I put in that book, because I'm passionate that it's
Hmm.
important, right? And so that's what I wanted to do. And so if I see that occurring, then I'm knowing I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how to measure it exactly, like, okay, I did this post and this got this result.
Right.
I don't know that we'll ever get there. As an
Uh-huh.
engineer, I would like to get there, but I don't know that we're ever going to get there. And the
Yeah.
same is true with digital marketing. It's getting harder and harder to
Right.
do attribution because there's so many interrelated parts that all have to come together.
So is it fair to say that analytical quantified side of you is okay, it's appeased because of the outcomes that you're experiencing?
Well, and you can measure the outcomes too, right?
Right.
You can look at, okay, well, whatever your outcome is, are you trying to get prospects? Are you trying to get whatever qualified prospects, or and the sales pipeline, or whatever the case may be, right? Whatever
Mhm.
outcome, you can look at that and you can see, okay, is my stats going up in that direction, or are they staying flat, or are they going? So I think there's definitely things you can monitor on all of that, but I also think there's a lot of there's still going to be a lot of ambiguity as to exactly
Mhm.
why all of those things are happening. So you need to focus more on the outcome versus the middle pieces that are occurring that are going to lead to that outcome.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, it's like if you go to networking events over and over again, and then you start developing meetings that lead to business
Yeah.
opportunities, you can have you know, a qualified point of going through my attendance at these. It's developed into this type of pipeline. And for me, that's that's good enough. It's not perfect. It's not, oh, on this day this happened and then this
Yes.
occurred. It's more
Yes.
of a larger meta view of what's
Yes.
happening. That
Yes.
fair to
And
say?
I've definitely seen that. And the meta view, as I said earlier, can start to hockey stick, right? And
Right,
you're not going to necessarily know why, other than the fact that you're doing the work.
right.
It's like that's really the simplicity of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I find one of the challenges with getting either sales leaders or even individual sales professionals or C suite leaders to adopt this voice in social is because we've adopted, especially over the last 10 plus years, a much more rigid approach to data.
Yeah. Well, and
And
data still plays into all of this. It's not as analytical XYZ, right,
right,
as maybe we would all like it. But I think you're looking at data from a lot of different sources. And again, are you achieving the outcome that you're looking for?
right,
You
right,
know, and again, even some of the vanity, I call them the vanity metrics, they do start to tell a story, you know,
right.
and they start to see, are you going in the right, direction? And, so there's definitely things you can do to determine, are you making traction and are you going in the right direction?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And like even today, and I don't know if you've noticed this happening, but somehow our StreamYard connection to LinkedIn failed. So it
Okay.
looks like we got about the first 6 minutes and then it failed. And for me, I'm sitting there going, where's the comments? Like we normally have people that are commenting and engaging with us and they're not here. So people are listening to the podcast. You have no idea how that we've missed right now. But when I look at things like that, you go, okay, well, this is kind of part of the digital world we live in, and we can repurpose this. Like for people listening, Tom and I are on live right now, and we're live in Facebook, and we were on LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube, and then it'll get repurposed into our podcast and repurposed into blogs. So this isn't dead, and we don't know where the data will come from because in a month from now somebody may see this on my blog or your blog or on YouTube, and all of a sudden it brings up more future conversations.
Could be a year from now, right?
Right.
But that's the problem as well, is you have, attribution windows, right? Like what is the
Yeah.
timeline? So yeah, it's not an exact science. So you got to focus more on the outcomes.
Yeah. So if and I know you're a co-founder and owner of your company, but let's just pretend you're a sales professional and somebody boss C-suite comes in and says, we don't have time for this anymore. All this social stuff, you need to stop. How would you address that?
I would give them a copy of the revenue zone and,
Great
and,
answer.
and say, read this.
Read
Um,
this.
yeah, but no, I would get, in all seriousness, I would, read that and understand that you want to be in a company that is going to have the highest chance for success now and into the future, right? For
Yeah.
yourself, for your own career, and for the company you're working with. So I would look really hard at, am I involved with a company that is adopting sort of this next generation of sales and marketing? Are they adopting the digital world? Are they, looking at these things? Because think about your own career, right? Think about where you want to be in 5 years or
Mhm.
10 years or whatever the case may be. And is this a place that's going to get me there?
Right.
So I think you have to really look at that and evaluate that. And if it's, just back to the same, how many phone calls you make, even on our CRM product, right? That's why we talk with CRM has historically been, tracking all your sales activity. We're the total opposite. Our CRM product is geared toward, how do we use data to help you make more sales and have more insights into what you're doing. But we still get a
Mhm.
lot of customers or prospects that are talking about how do I track activity and how many phone calls we're
Yeah.
making. We keep like, no, 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 no. You know, that's not where that's not the purpose of this. That's not, you can
Yeah.
do that, but that's not really should be the driving piece of this. Again, doesn't mean
Yeah.
we shouldn't be tracking how hard, what somebody's doing or working, but it's just, again, that mindset and where are you going to go over the next, period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom, I want to wrap us up here. I'm sorry for you. We didn't have all the comments and questions. We usually have great interactions going on our lives. But what I would love for you to do is share with everybody, where can we find a copy of your book? And then where can they connect with you and Leadsmart Technologies?
Sure. So the book is on Amazon. And the audiobook will actually be out very soon as well. So within days.
Are you? Is it going to be your voice or
No,
is
I
someone else?
didn't narrate
Oh,
it, but I've got a great narrator. So,
okay.
um, so that's going to be
I
out
like your
soon.
voice. I wish you would have done it.
Okay. Maybe I'll do another version, right?
There you go.
Um, so, and then there's the website is therevenuezone.com. So you can also go there and it'll guide you to Amazon. Plus there's a bunch of resources. That's one of the things we did in the book is we had a bunch of resources and tools and other things to help with the process. So that's all there as well. My CRM software company is leadsmarttech.com. And like I said, we're focused more on sort of a new way of doing CRM, if you will. And that's really focused more on that. How do I use this? How do I use CRM and data and so forth to drive more sales rather than just track activity? And if you want to connect with me personally, would be LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn is tburton5350. And, love to connect and let me know that you saw me here with Brandon, and love to connect and happy to share any other advice or help that I can do.
Yeah, and I would tell everybody to go and follow Tom, if nothing else.
Yeah,
Connect
kick
with
up my
him.
metrics.
Yeah, well, follow him because you've got great videos on there. You're sharing excerpts from the book, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of great information on there for sales leaders, for sales professionals, and even the marketing leaders that are struggling with the amount of MQLs they're getting and those converting to sales accepted leads.
We could have a whole nother discussion on that. That should be another show.
Well, I tell you what, if you're willing, I'd love to have you back and we'll have that conversation for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, everybody, thank you so much and for joining us on the Digital Influence Show. I'm really bummed that our LinkedIn connection failed today, but everyone else on the podcast or any other platform, thank you so much for being on the Digital Influence Show with us today. I'm Brandon Lee. I'm so honored and blessed that I get to host the show and have great conversations with people like Tom Burton, and the Revenue Zone. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Brandon.
All right, everybody. Have a wonderful Friday. For the lives, everyone on the podcast, make it a great day, and we'll see you next time.